So the first one is the limit of a constant. Yeah. So the limit of a constant theorem states that the limit of a constant function is equal to the constant. Let's say we have the limit of c as x approaches to letter A is c, where c is a constant. Okay. So ang ibig sabihin lang nito, kapag hinahanap natin yung limit ng constant, the answer would be the constant itself. Let's say we are going to find the limit of, so in finding the limit of 5 as x approaches to 4, the answer would be the constant itself, which is 5. So yan yung limit ng constant theorem. Ang ibig sabihin lang niya, kung kukunin natin yung limit ng isang constant, yung sagot niya mismo is the constant itself. Let's have another one. Let's say we are going to find the limit of -2 as x approaches to, let's say, 0. So the limit of -2 as x approaches to 0, yan, we focus on the constant itself. Since ito ay limit ng isang constant, automatically, the answer is the constant itself. That's -2. So yung sagot natin in finding for the limit of -2 as x approaches to 0, the answer is -2. Ang ating second theorem ay the limit of a function x. So given theorem 2, it says the limit of a function itself. So ibig sabihin, for any number A, limit of x as x approaches to A is equal to A. Okay? Meaning, if we are going to find the limit of a function x, kung hahanapin natin yung limit ng function na x, kung saan it approaches A, kung saan si x approaches A, then the answer would be kung saan nag-a-approach si x. So kung mapapansin natin, in this statement, it says the limit of x as x approaches to A is equal to A. Ibig sabihin, kung isosolve natin, if we are going to find the limit of x, ang sagot natin is kung saan nag-a-approach si x. So si x dito ay nag-a-approach to A. Automatically, ang sagot ay letter A. So we put that into example for us to illustrate this theorem. So let's have an example for that. So applying the limit of a function x, let's say meron tayong limit of x as x approaches to 5. Okay. As x approaches to 5, ang sagot natin dito is 5. Okay. Kung saan nag-a-approach si x, that would be our answer, given ang limit of x. Let's have another one. Let's say the limit of x as x approaches to, let's say, 1/3. Yan. Again, ang magiging sagot natin kung saan nag-a-approach si x. And x approaches to 1/3, therefore, ang sagot natin is 1/3. That's the limit of a function x. For the third one, so now we are going to find the limit naman of a constant and the function f of x. So in finding for the limit of a constant and a function f of x, yan. Ano ang ibig sabihin ng limit of a constant and the function? So the limit of a constant and the function, this states that the limit of a constant and a function is the constant times the limit of the function. We need to multiply. We need to multiply the constant and the limit of a function. Suppose we're given a function which is the limit of f of x is equal to, as x approaches to A is equal to L, and then meron tayong, and then we are going to find the limit and then we have the function, which is c, being multiplied to the f of x. As x approaches to a, ang magiging sagot natin is the constant, and then multiply to the function. So para mas maintindihan natin, we put this into illustrations. Let's have our first example for this one. Yan. So the limit of, we need to find the limit of 7x as x approaches to 4. So mapapansin natin na it's a combination of a constant at saka nung x or any function. So ang gagawin lang natin is we multiply the constant and the limit of the functions. So ang gagawin natin for our example number 1. So for yung constant natin, i-move lang natin siya dito. Yan, move lang natin dito ang ating constant. So this becomes 7, the limit of x as x approaches to 4. I just moved the constant to the left side ng limit. Yan. And then, copy ko lang yung 7, copy 7, and we find for the limit of x as x approaches to 4. So, napag-aralan natin kanina na for us to find the limit of x, ito, yung second one, for us to find the limit of x, ang sagot natin is kung saan nag-a-approach si x. So kung meron tayong limit ng x as x approaches to 4, therefore, ang magiging sagot natin dito ay, what would be the answer here? Limit of x as x approaches to 4.
4 po, ma'am.
4 po.
4. Kasi kung saan nag-a-approach si x. Yeah. So therefore, ang final answer natin, the final answer would be 7 times 4, that would be 28. So that's the limit of a constant and a function. So let's have another one. Let's say the limit of 8x as x approaches to negative 3. So the limit of 8x as x approaches to negative 3. Again, the first step, kapag ganito, we move muna the function, the constant here. So this becomes 8, and then the limit of x as x approaches to negative 3. Okay, copy lang natin si 8. Solving for the limit of x as x approaches to negative 3, ang magiging sagot po natin ay kung saan nag-a-approach si x, which is negative 3. And then multiplying them together, this becomes 8 times 3 is 24. So that would be negative 24. Okay, so we have the limit of a sum and difference of a functions. So for this theorem, suppose we have, let's say, we have the limit of f of x as x approaches to letter A, and this is L, and we have, let's say, the limit of g of x as x approaches to A and is equal to letter M. And then for us to apply, let's say we have this, the given, and then how are we going to apply the sum and difference rule, or the limit of sum and difference of a function? So this only states that the limit of a sum is the sum difference of the limits. Let's have, we write it this way. So it becomes the limit of f of x, either it's either we add or we subtract, depends on the operations being used. g of x is equal to L plus n as x approaches to letter A. Ibig sabihin lang nito, kapag meron tayong given na f of x, and then another which is the g of x, and then we need to add them or we need to subtract them, ang gagawin natin is, let's treat them separately. Treat natin yung functions separately for us to get the limit of it. Let's have an example. Limit of 2x plus 5, 2x plus 5 as x approaches to negative 1. Yeah. So we have the limit of 2x plus 5 as x approaches to negative 1. Again, for us to solve this limit, we need to treat them separately. Okay? So this becomes the limit of 2x as x approaches to negative 1 plus the limit of 5 as x approaches to negative 1. Yan. So, separate lang natin with the use of operation, which is the addition. And then, solve na natin. How are we going to find for the limit of 2x as x approaches to negative 1? Again, i-apply natin yung constant and function x. Yung previous lang natin na theorem. So, ang gagawin natin, yung 2, we move that here. Kaya it becomes 2. Limit of x as x approaches to negative 1 plus, copy ko lang muna, the limit of 5 as x approaches to negative 1. Yan. Oops. As x approaches to negative 1. Okay. And then, copy 2, the limit of x as x approaches to negative 1. So, the limit of x as x approaches to negative 1, makikita natin sa theorem 2, kung saan nag-a-approach si x, and that would be negative 1 plus the limit of a constant being stated in the first theorem na kung hahanapin natin ang limit ng constant, ang sagot is the constant itself. So we have 5. Simplifying this together, that's negative 1 times 2, that's negative 2, and then 5. We combine them. This would give us positive 3. So therefore, the limit of 2x plus 5 as x approaches to negative 1 is equal to positive 3. So the limit of a product and a function. It says that, suppose we have the limit of f of x as x approaches to a, let's say this is L, and the limit of g of x as x approaches to a is equal to m. Okay. Then we need lang to multiply the two. So let's say if it is given in this format, the limit of the f of x multiplied to the g of x as x approaches to a, ang magiging sagot ay the limit for the f of x and the limit for the g of x, and then we multiply them together. Let's have an example for that. It's the product of the limits. Okay? So kukunin muna natin separately, and then we multiply. We multiply the answer to its limits. So let's have let's have our first example. Let's say the limit of x multiplied to 5x minus 3 as x approaches to 4. Applying na the limit of the product of a function rule. Ang sabi lang dito, we need to get the product of the limits. Kukunin muna natin yung limits ng bawat isa and then saka natin sila i-multiply together for us to apply the product limit rule. So let's have limit of x. Siseparate ko lang silang dalawa. The limit of x as x approaches to 4, as x approaches to 4, multiply to limit of 5x minus 3 as x approaches to 4. Siniparit ko lang muna sila as x approaches to 4. Yan. And then, kukunin natin yung limit nila separately. The limit of x as x approaches to 4. Copy lang muna natin. So, the limit of x as x approaches to 4. Multiply. Yan. So, mapapansin natin sa pangalawang sa pangalawang function, mayroong operation dyan which is subtraction. So, kaya yung 5x minus 3, ititreat din natin separately. Yan. So, the limit of 5x as x approaches to 4 minus the limit of 3 as x approaches to 4. Yan. And then we look for the limit. So the limit of x as x approaches to 4, kapag naghahanap tayo ng limit ng x, ang magiging sagot natin kung saan nag-a-approach si x. Kaya it is 4. And then, multiply natin to, we look for the limit of 5x. 5x as x approaches to 4. So that could be, ang ginagawa natin, we move this sa tabi ng limit on the left side, kaya it becomes 5 limit of x as x approaches to 4. Yan. So, copy ko lang muna yung kapila. The limit of 3 as x approaches to 4. And then we look for their limits. So this becomes 5 multiply to the limit of x as x approaches to 4. Ang sagot ay kung saan nag-a-approach si x. Kaya it's 4. And minus the limit of 3 as x approaches to 4. Ang sagot ay yung constant. Yung constant. So kaya ang sagot natin dito ay 3. Is equal to 4. This becomes 5 times 4 is 20. 20 minus 3 ay 17. 17. And then 4 times 17. What is the answer? 4 times 17. Ano sagot sa 4 times 17?
68 po, ma'am.
68. 68. So therefore, ang sagot natin for the limit of x times 5x minus 3 as x approaches to 4 is equal to 68. So if we're going to try to, to solve this one, so this becomes the limit of 3 as x approaches to 1. And then we need to multiply this one to the limit of the 4x plus 5 as x approaches to 1. So we copy ko lang muna the limit of 3 as x approaches to 1, multiply to the limit of 4x, separate ko, as x approaches to 1, plus the limit of 5, ayan, thank you sa mga nag-post ng sagot nila, limit of 5 as x approaches to 1. So this becomes, copy lang muna, the limit of 3 as x approaches to 1. And then this becomes 4, limit of x as x approaches to 1, plus the limit of 5 as x approaches to 1. So this becomes getting the limit of 3. That is, the answer would be 1. The answer is 3. Kasi yung function, it's constant itself. And then we have 4 times 1 plus 5. Tama ba? Sagot ko. Oh, tama. So this becomes 3. And then 9. Kaya ang final answer natin ay equal to 27. So we have the quotient, the limit of a quotient of a functions. Parang ano lang siya, parang product lang din. So ang gagawin lang, we get the quotient naman, instead of getting the product, we get the quotient naman ng limits. Provided na yung denominator natin is not equal to 0. Kasi magiging undefined yun. Suppose we have the limit of f of x as x approaches to a, let's say this is L, yung sagot niya, and the limit of g of x as x approaches to a, and then sagot niya is m, and then let's say ang given natin ay the limit of f of x divided by the g of x as x approaches to a, and x approaches to a is equal to L over M. Yan. So provided that ang M natin, M should not be equal to 0. Yan. Hindi dapat siya mag-equal to 0. So the limit of x over x plus 5 as x approaches to negative 3. Yan. So kunin muna natin yung limit ng numerator and then we solve for the limit ng denominator. Saka natin kunin yung quotient nila. So this becomes the limit of x sa numerator muna as x dito tayo sa gitna. As x approaches to negative 3 over yung limit ng denominator, the limit of x plus 5 as x approaches to negative 3. Yan. So we look for the limit ng numerator, the limit of x as x approaches to negative 3. Again, ito yung second theorem na kung kukunin natin yung limit ng x, ang magiging sagot natin ay kung saan nag-a-approach si x at siya ay nag-a-approach kay negative 3, kaya ang magiging numerator natin ay negative 3 over, yan. So mapapansin natin sa denominator, that's the limit of x plus 5. So kukunin natin yung limit ng x as x approaches to negative 3 plus, separate lang natin, the limit of 5 as x approaches to negative 3. Copy the numerator over the limit of x as x approaches to negative 3. Ang magiging sagot natin ay kung saan nag-a-approach si x, and that is negative 3 plus, okay, ito na lang to, plus the limit of 5 as x approaches to negative 3. This is the constant rule. Kung kukunin natin yung limit ng constant, ang sagot yung constant mismo. Kaya it's plus 5. So this becomes negative 3 over 2. So ang magiging sagot natin ay negative 3 over 2, or it can be 1 and 1/2. Or I mean negative 1 and 1/2. Yeah. Okay. So the final answer for this one is negative 3 over 2. So for the numerator, that would be the limit of, wait. So that's the limit of x plus 3 over, the limit of x plus 3 as x approaches to negative 1 over the limit of x plus 4 as x approaches to negative 1. So this becomes the limit of x as x approaches to negative 1 plus the limit of 3 as x approaches to negative 1 over the limit of x as x approaches negative 1 plus the limit of 4 as x approaches to negative 1. So this becomes the limit of x as x approaches to negative 1. The answer is negative 1 plus the limit of 3 as x approaches to negative 1 ay the constant itself over the limit of x as x approaches to negative 1, that's the negative 1, and then limit of 4 as x approaches to negative 1 is 4. Simplifying this one, it becomes 2 over 3. So the final answer is 2/3. So the limit of power functions. So the limit of power function, it states that, so the limit of, let's say, the f of x raised to a certain power p as x approaches to letter A, then ang magiging sagot natin would be, kukunin muna natin yung limit ng f of x as x approaches to letter A, saka natin siya i-raise sa kanyang power. Example. Yan. The limit of x raised to 4 as x approaches to 2. Yan. So the limit of x raised to 4 as x approaches to 4. Yan. So gagawin natin, kukunin muna natin yung limit ng function. So the limit of x as x approaches to 2, and then saka natin siya i-raise to 4. Finding for the limit of x as x approaches to 2, ang sagot natin ay 2. Tama? This is the second rule. And then, raise lang natin sa 4. Then, ang ating magiging final answer ay 2 times 2 is 4, times 2, 8, times 2. So, it becomes 2 raised to 4 ay 16. Let's say the limit of x cubed as x approaches to negative 2. So we get muna the limit of the function, the limit of the function. So that becomes the limit of x as x approaches to negative 2, and then we raise that one to 3. So this becomes the limit of x as x approaches to negative 2. So it becomes negative 2 raised to 3. So negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4 times a negative 2, that's negative 8. Okay. What if ganito siya? We need to find for the limit of, let's say, x plus 2 square. So x plus 2 square as x approaches to 1. Same process pa din. We look for the limit of function muna bago natin siya i-square. So this becomes the limit of x plus 2 as x approaches to 1 and then square that to 2. Kunin muna natin yung limit ng ating function. So this becomes the limit of x as x approaches to 1. Yan. Plus the limit of 2. The limit of 2 as x approaches to 1. And then square. So the limit of x as x approaches to 1, and that is 1, plus the limit of 2 as x approaches to 1 ay 2 square. So this becomes 3 square, or this is equal to 9. Yan. So the final answer is 9. So that's the limit of power function. Again, we solve muna for the limit function na nasa loob. And then kapag may sagot na tayo sa limit ng function, saka natin siya i-raise to its power. So let's have the limit of root functions. Sa root function naman, same lang siya sa power. We solve muna yung inner function bago natin kunin yung the roots of it. So the limit of root functions. Yeah. So this becomes, let's say, the limit of, let's say we have the limit of the square root of x as x approaches to a. Then ang magiging sagot natin ay the square root ng limit of x as x approaches to a. So let's have our example for this one to understand it better. Let's say we have the square root of, the limit of square root of x as x approaches to, let's say, approaches to 16. Limit of the square root of x as x approaches to 16. Kunin muna natin yung limit ng nasa loob ng radical sign. So it becomes limit ng x as x approaches to 16. Pag nakuha na natin yan, kukunin na natin ang kanyang square root. So it becomes the limit of x as x approaches to 16. Ang sagot ay 16. Yan. Getting the square root of 16, that is
4 po.
4. So ang ating final answer is 4. Okay, what if ganito? We need to find for the limit of the square root of, let's say, the square root of x, x squared, x squared plus, let's say 9. The limit of x squared plus 9 as x approaches to 4. Yeah. Kunin muna natin yung limit ng nasa loob ng radical sign. So this becomes the limit of x squared plus 9 as x approaches to 4. And then, ilabas natin yung radical sign. So this becomes limit of x squared as x approaches to 4 plus the limit of 9 as x approaches to 4. Copy ko lang muna yung radical sign. The limit of x squared as x approaches to 4. Ang ginagawa natin dati ay, ang ina-apply, ang ginagawa natin kapag it's raised to a power, So we get muna the limit of x as x approaches to 4 bago natin siya erase sa kanyang power plus the limit of 9 as x approaches to 4. Ayan. Sulat ko lang muna yung radical sign. So the limit of x as x approaches to 4, ang sagot natin dyan ay kung saan nag-a-approach si x, so kaya it's 4 square plus the limit of 9. The limit of a function, constant 9 as x approaches to 4, that is 9.
Times.
So this becomes, sobra ta drawing ko. And then this becomes 4 times 4, that's 16. 16 plus 9, the answer is 25. 25. Getting the square root of 25,
5.
that is equal to 5. So therefore, ang ating final answer is equal to 5. So ito yung limit ng polynomial function. Let's say the limit of polynomial function. The limit of the polynomial function. Yeah. So let's say if we have the p of x and the q of x are polynomials, then ang magiging sagot natin is the limit of the p of x as x approaches to a, then ang magiging sagot natin ay the p of a. How does this work? Ito ay shortcut on how are we going to find the limits. How are we going to find the limits? Sinosolve siya ng ganito, pero this is not apply to all. It's not apply to all. So ito siya. Let's say the limit of the x squared minus 4x, let's say plus 7, as x approaches to 3. So given this function, polynomial function, para ma-solve siya ng madali, ang ginagawa, yung 3, sinosubstitute lang natin sa function. So this becomes, yung itong x, papalitan lang natin ng 3. So 3 squared minus 4 times 3 plus 7 is equal to 3 times 3 ay 9 minus 12 plus 7. So this is equal to negative 3 plus 7. And ang sagot natin ay 4.